This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new value, and a new experience.
Welcome to the Ghee Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a Ghee Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Ghee Spot. I'm sitting here virtually with one of my closest friends, the wonderful, the beautiful Dr. Kirsten Mackey. She's not only is she like one of the smartest people I've ever met, but she's also really kind and super interested in a lot of the things that I'm interested in. She's a board certified family medicine physician, a traditional osteopath, but she loves to delve into the wild witchy ways, as we love to do here at Shakti School. And she's also one of our core teachers here at Shakti School. So I'm super stoked. We were joking before we started about how we had to get a podcast going to like actually sit down and have a conversation because we're both busy ladies, but I am so happy to have you here. Dr. K, welcome to the Ghee Spot.
So psyched to be on the Ghee Spot. Of course, Katie Silcox has a podcast called Ghee Spot.
Of course she does. It's all about returning to the part of us that knows it's all going to be okay. That's what Ghee does.
Mm-hmm. Ghee on everything. Just put it right all over everything. I have a huge bottle of ghee, by the way, underneath in my guest bedroom waiting for you. So,
I know who sent that.
When you're ready.
Yeah, I've been on a cleanse. I'm officially coming off of it, and I've drank and eaten so much ghee. I have to say, it really is amazing. I feel pretty good. So Kirsten, why don't you just, for people that are listeners that are not in Shakti School, why don't you give us a little bit of a background around how you decided to be a doctor and then how it's continuing to evolve? Like, what does it even mean to be a physician or a healer or a doctor? And like, give us a little background on you.
Yeah, in a nutshell, it's sort of a long story, but in a nutshell, I got a hefty dose of the allopathic mainstream limited medical model as a teenager, and where I had a couple of big falls as a snowboarder and had to get through a journey of chronic pain as like a 17-year-old that led downstream to what I now know as downstream effects, constipation and lack of hormonal regulation and IBS and depression and all these other things that I knew that probably happened right after I broke my back, but none of the doctors that I was going to could connect those things. So I kind of made it my mission to become one of those doctors that might acknowledge those other aspects and how they connect. So I went to like an allopathic med school that also had more of a holistic minded approach philosophy, which is Doctor of Osteopathic. I have a DO on the end of my name. And that aspect of our study, which ended up being, I don't know, about 25% of our curriculum, the rest of our curriculum was the same as any other MD, is the curriculum that helps me tie together different organ systems, different body parts in a way that a lot of my MD cohorts don't understand. And it also is that in this hands-on modality that I use day in and day out is the thing that helps me to navigate through different body levels, different energetic levels, both subtle and physical, and feel pretty confident intuitively feeling into like what's really happening. So that's kind of what like leads me into like what I'm really excited about right now as a primary care provider, you end up being kind of a quarterback to when somebody comes in and they say, well, I had, this trauma when I was 10 and that trauma when I was 25. And I think ever since, I had that parasite in Nicaragua, for example, everything
guys,
went
and
down.
by the way, she's not talking about, for example, like that actually happened to Kirsten and I together when we were together in Nicaragua. And I think we're over it, right?
Just recently,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That actually happened. And I didn't just have a health journey as a teenager. I had a health journey as a 20-something-year-old and then as a 30-something-year-old. And now I'm coming through the other side of that like parasite, Lyme, multi-chronic infection-y systemic inflammation situation, which has helped blast me into this next realm of trying to figure out, like, how it is, Silcox, when you have a symptom and then you talk to somebody else who had that symptom and they're like, oh, you have to go see so-and-so and have a past life regression, or like you have to go get a sauna, or you have to buy this supplement, or go on mimosa pudica, or you have to do this. And I've done this to you and you've done this to me. And like, we all do it for each other because we want to see each other get healthy. And everybody's journey is so unique that oftentimes, when I had Lyme or whatever, people would be like, you have to go on antibiotics. You have to not go on antibiotics and get colonics every day. So there's all this input coming in from 1,000 different directions, well-meaning directions. But I wanted to figure out a way to kind of like streamline that process and make a unique process and protocol for my patients and for myself and for my loved ones. And it really like came back to these like koshas, actually, which is what I wanted to chat about.
Before we dive in, it might be helpful to give a little definition of that. And before that, I want to say, I don't even know how long ago, Kirsten, maybe 6-7 years ago, I was teaching a Tantra immersion in San Francisco. And there was this like unassuming young lady in the back of the room that for the 5 days or weekend or whatever it was, like didn't say anything. And then at the end of the training, this cute girl, I thought she was like 21. Came up to me and was like, hey, can I give you, I loved your class. Like, I would like to give you a treatment, and I'm a doctor. And I was like, what? You're like 21. And it was Kirsten, of course. And that's really where our friendship began, was this training on Tantra where we talked about this concept. And in that there was like this merging, me and you kind of bringing the allopathic background and me bringing this like really tantric background, but both of us being like super interested in everything, really, whatever works. And I think you and I are like, and we're both Leos, and we have a joke that we're kind of like have similar lives. But my point with all this is like this deep passion for not only studying these ancient technologies and then merging them with the new, but really that's like an oversimplified version of what's going on. What's actually going on is an updating of the system in everyone to understand that the ancient and the new are not merging. They're the same freaking thing. Mm-hmm. And the ancient is getting updated and the new is actually getting updated. And so in that vein, I want to come into this conversation around the koshas, not from a place of like, oh, here's what the ancients say, and then here's what the modern perspective is, but moreover, like reality is just happening. It's this unending pulsation of truth. And we're kind of coming at it and going, well, how can we understand this through these different lenses? And reality itself is evolving. And so I think that, in other words, there's this false idea in our culture right now of the polarity of science versus, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you and I are very much in agreement that this is the problem itself. It's this polarization of reality. And so I really want to come into this conversation like, no, like these are lenses through which we can see the world. Does it help you in this up leveling of your system, whether it be physiologically, emotionally, energetically, et cetera? And I think that's where the koshas are really super helpful. And so just to define the term for people that aren't in Shakti school or don't know about what the koshas are, the word kosha means a layer or a sheath. And it's in some ways like a covering or a veil over the true essence of our being. And it's not to say that the sheaths or veils aren't actually real themselves and don't matter and it's all divinity, but it's this understanding that you and I aren't just this body, and we're not just our thoughts, and we're not just our feelings. Like we're this composite of a lot of different things. And these different layers of who we are actually influencing our experience of reality most of the time in ways that we're completely unaware of. And then we're like, why do I feel like shit? Or why do I always date the same people? Or why am I craving peanut butter when I know I'm allergic to it? Like all these ways in which life is like really confusing sometimes. And so the koshas practices are ways of interfacing with intimacy with these different aspects of who we are so as to bring consciousness or light to them, so as to, as the ancient teachings say, quote, purify them, which that, you know, there's some problematics with that word, but that's sort of just a really brief introduction on something I usually spend 5 days talking about.
Right. Yes, I've been to that workshop in Hawaii where we talked about this, and I was also like that person in the back row that was not saying anything, but my mind was being blown silently on my notebook paper, and that's where some of these ideas started coming to fruition. But that's hilarious that you thought I was a 21-year-old, because like all through residency, I would like enter the room and there'd be like, you're like a 13-year-old boy. Like, who, what? The Justin Bieber hair helps.
Yeah.
With that.
See her, but we'll post a picture. She has Justin Bieber hair, and she looks like a nymph forest fairy, but we digress. Okay. So koshas.
So check this out. So there's the koshas, as you were just brilliantly introducing, that you could get into for 5 days, as it exists and explains the multiple dimensions of who we are, not just a physical body, but an energetic body and a spirit body, and all these layers of who we are. And this can be applied, and it was applied by one of my teachers, Dr. Diedrich Klinghardt, who I studied with in Seattle, German MD, brilliant in the chronic infection world and energetic healing world. And he spent some time in India, and he applied healing modalities to this kosha model. So it's not just multiple layers of who we are, but in the context of healing on all of these different layers matters. And sometimes there needs to be priority of healing on one kosha over another. And the model is essentially like really useful to like I said, in that challenge of trying to figure out, okay, what do we tackle first? Is it your gut microbiome, or is it your relationship with your mom, or is it, which way do we go? And so it's a really helpful way to simplify, like you said, simplify all this complexity of who we are and all the complexity of all the different healing modalities that exist, and like basically narrow it down to like, what are we going to get the most bang for our buck? What's the most high yield thing to start with? So I don't know if you got that image that I sent you to your email, but it's just an image that I created that says the 5 levels of healing, and it lays it out like the koshas.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to this for people.
Yeah, but it's just a way to a visual on what Katie and I are talking about with the different koshas and then the different types of healing that might work on that layer
Cool.
and help you. Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Are we going to go through this?
Well, it might take a long time to go through all of it, but
right. So I think what would be helpful is for people, we have a lot of people who listen that they're like, wow, I don't know a lot about this, or I've never heard of this, or some people are like, oh, I've heard of this, but I'm not sure. And so maybe what we can do is just talk about what are these five levels, and it could be 7 levels or it could be 9, but like the yogis outlined who you are into 5 levels. And what's so important about what Kirsten's talking about is that I think whenever we have an experience, we tend to think that like, oh, this is a physical problem, it needs a physical solution, or well, this is an emotional problem, so it needs an emotional solution. And what the koshas are saying is like, actually, it needs everything. And so briefly, I'll just say, we don't even need to go through the Sanskrit, but you have a physical body, a more mental body, an energetic body, a body that is known as the body of the wise one, or the intuition, or the inner teacher. And then you have a field called the bliss body, which is not always blissful, actually. It's this vast field where all the potentialities of you exist throughout all lifetimes. And there are different means by which we interface with each of these bodies. And so like, if you've got so there can be this tendency to be like, oh, well, I've got a physical problem, I'm going to offer it a physical solution. And indeed, like you were saying, if in moments of acute distress, we have to prioritize the physicality, or we just like peace out. But like, so often these things overlap. And what first comes to mind, and what I've been working with in my own body, is like when I'm having an emotional experience or a sensation, rather than bringing the mind to it, I'm actually interfacing with those sensations and emotions by saying to them, oh my God, hi, you're an old body memory. You're an old memory. And I think that is so helpful. I think about these guys that get back pain or an ulcer, and it's like, oh, I've got a physical problem. And I've said to clients, like, what would happen if you actually said to the ulcer or back pain, I know you're emotional. I know that you're an emotional issue. And thank you, the FedEx guy. So anyway, that's a very brief overview of what these 5 bodies actually are. And maybe you can kind of take it from there, Kirsten. I'm going to grab this package as you discuss.
Totally. Yeah. So we've got these five layers, and we also have different types of modalities that fit and address these 5 layers. But like Katie said, we need to, we are simultaneously an energetic body and a mind body and a physical body and a spirit body, right? So most of these dysfunctions are happening on multiple layers, and we need all the koshas need to heal in order to heal a complex issue. Now, if you slipped off the curb and sprained your ankle, it might just be a sprain of your ankle, and it might not mean that
it's a father issue.
Exactly. You damaged you keep falling on the left side and you have mother issues and this and that. But if, using that same example, if you often fall to the left, there might be something there more chronically that might need this model in order to break down, okay, like, maybe there is a myofascial issue that's disrupting the whole left fascial chain, but why is that left side disrupted? Does it go back to another structural issue earlier in your life, or does it go back to another layer of this problem? And so what my teacher says is that all of these layers, the way you're going to get the most results with patients, with clients, with your own body, is when you heal multiple layers of this at one time. So better to address, I'll use the functional medicine as an example. They, for instance, lie in the Annamaya kosha, the physical body, and this is based in biochemistry. A lot of functional medicine will supply the body with supplements and ways to balance your chemistry. Same with allopathic medicine, right? We take a lot of medicines to change and shift the chemistry of the body. So if you go and take 75 supplements every day, you're going to do a really good job healing the Annamaya Kosha, but likely aren't going to be addressing any of these upper layers, which if you see the picture and the image that we're looking at, it's a pyramid. And so the Annamaya Kosha, the food body, the physical body, is the base of this triangle. And so if you're trying to heal a physical issue from a physical space, you're only going to heal that level and the levels below it. And so you're just going to stay in that physical body when you take 75 supplements. Not to downplay 75 supplements. Sometimes you need that much help for a time period to really balance that Annamaya Kosha. But if you were to do a little bit of functional medicine with a little bit of energy medicine, which would be the acupuncturist and let me look at my image here, the pranamaya kosha, pranayama, qigong, microcurrent frequency therapies, autonomic response techniques, the tapping, EFT, these are all pranamaya kosha, the energetic body. So a little bit of that's the next layer up. A little bit of psychotherapy, applied psychokinesiology, MDR, homeopathy is the next layer up.
In the mental body.
Exactly. And that's part of the mental body. And so if you're doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it's going to trickle down and support that Annamaya Kosha, support that physical symptom that you probably came into that office wondering about, your leaky gut or your chronic back pain or whatever it is. Healing on multiple layers is where it's at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what I would add to that is this pyramid that folks can look at. We'll put it on our blog and people can see what we're talking about. Like, it is so useful to see this as a pyramid and that trickle down effect. And I would also add that it also isn't that, in the sense that all of these layers are essentially interwoven into one another. And so let's say you do just work on the physical realm. Let's say you do just do that. There will be a down river effect. What makes this deeply healing, though, like, I'll give you an example that's coming to mind. Let's say you've been dealing with the physical experience of being really bloated all the time and having hormonal imbalance, and you go and you see that you've had a 10-pound fibroid in your body, and you do surgery and that gets removed, and lo and behold, like, let's say you do no therapy, no energy work, nothing, like, just having that out of your body is going to have downriver effects in those other realms, right? But there may not be consciousness around it. Mm-hmm. So what the distinction of working, quote, with these koshas is really the importance of, like, what one of my teachers calls the hub of it all, which in Tantra or yoga, we would refer to as Purusha, this part of us that can witness all these other things, right? And so that capacity to be identified with this part of you that can kind of hold this witness consciousness around what's going on in the physical body, what's going on in the energy body. Because I think that we can get really, we run the risk of getting caught in identifying with any of these bodies, even the bliss body, right? Like, you and I know this really well. Like, okay, we know we aren't just this Western medical model. We know that we're energy. And then we start to become obsessed with energy and we identify with energy. Or in my case, like, I'm obsessed with the emotional body because it's been such a realm of so much healing. But in doing that, now I'm having to learn how to unmerge from emotional states, because then we can become really identified with ourselves as an emotional creature. And so to just, like, be able to, like, pull back from all the koshas, identify with that, and then start to work within all of these layers.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we've had the same conversation about healing a chakra,
Yeah.
or working on a chakra that is maybe imbalanced. And for me, for instance, it's like my third chakra, right? It's definitely been a little dim or spinning a little slower or whatever. But the idea is not to just focus on number 3 and become super myopic on number 3, but to feel all of them. They're all spinning and affecting one another, and ultimately are going to be the thing that heal that one that's kind of dragging along. So they're kind of occurring simultaneously, like you were just talking about with the koshas.
So in our world today, Dr. Kirsten, I mean, and we can bring this back to these koshas if you want, but I think just practically speaking, one of the things that I'm really, a shift that I've had as of late is to really sense into this entire process that I feel like look, if you're not waking up and experiencing a pretty high level of grief and anxiety, then you're dead. You're fucking dead. I'm just going to say it. Like, if you have any sensitivity to life on this planet right now, you are going to be feeling the fact that we are in a fundamental shift of reality on all of these levels. Like, if you're not experiencing that, like, you're either fully enlightened, and I just don't even believe in that at this point, or you're just not paying attention. You're numbing out in some way. And I just think it's important for people to know that, like, everyone I know is being invited into their deepest stuff right now. And in a way, because of COVID and the lockdowns, and we're forced to it, actually, almost, or we will numb out. And so one of the things that's been so big for me lately is to just really be resting in this place of such deep trust and surrender. And as one of my colleagues, Dr. Scott Blossom, says, bowing before the goddess of Corona, in the sense that she, whether it's real or not, right? Which of course it's real, but like, whether you believe that that it's as big a deal or not, the goddess Corona has forced all of us into the new paradigm. And within that new paradigm, I think that we can get really caught in feeling that we need to fix everything. And so my practice lately has just been like, I get to actually just receive what's here unfolding in front of me. And so what is your advice for people on this planet right now at this time in regard to their awakening or their healing, or even just like making it through, however you want to really word it?
Yeah, I think that I totally agree that if you're not feeling this in some way, you're completely checked out. You're completely checked out, right? But I have been seeing increasingly in my practice since COVID-19 that I'm seeing this influx of interesting new people that that are having some sort of physical symptom that they might not have connected to the stress of the world, but that I can see pretty obviously. And so even though there might not be that that recognition of like, oh wow, I'm really feeling the world deeply or whatever, it's impacting us in this very I guess to bring it back to the kosha, on a physical level for some, on a mental level, other people are super depressed. Other people just feel super off. Other people, like multiple people, healer friends who I know, have had some wacky sleeping schedules. And so it's manifesting in all of us in a different way, but no doubt, like, I don't think anyone's coming out of this unscathed in a good way, because it's waking most of us up. To the fact that,
what do you think it's waking us to?
Good question. I mean, I think it's waking us up to a new paradigm, the paradigm that I hope I'm alive to see, at least in medicine, because this one's not working for us, and I'm sure in other people's realms, whether you're a lawyer or a politician or a Shakti school teacher or whatever, you've been waiting for this shift to happen on a certain level. And we're waking up to a transformation of some sort that is, if you ever watch like a time-lapse video of like something being birthed or dying or transforming in some sort of way, it's freaking painful. And I think that's what's happening on a larger scale. I kind of forgot what we were talking about.
Well, I just think what we were talking about the Koshas and like what people, I think I just shifted the topic to just really address that, like, we're in this sort of pivotal liminal space. And by that, I mean this great pause. I'm feeling it in my life where, you know, the me a year ago would have been like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to create some excitement in my life. I'm going to get excited about this and that. And now reality is like, nope, you can't make any of those plans. And as I've tried to make plans, they just keep getting like shot to hell. Yeah. And it's like this goddess Corona, right? The energetic of this time that's forcing us to be with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, I'm curious about what are you saying to people who come into your office as far as how to not only survive, but maybe even thrive and come through this time, to be able to say that, like, I went through this grand transformation and I fully used it to my spiritual advantage?
Well, check this out. Like, I think a few years ago, you were like, when do we have to, like, maybe even like it was, you also said it this morning, you were like, when are we going to like not have to be sick in order to like grow and expand? And that's been my journey, and certainly your journey in a way, where you go through something really hard, and that an illness or something that affects your body. And the answer is like, I think we've all gone through this so that we can be guiding others through the world getting sick right now, and the world suffocating, and the world is really going through that chronic illness state that when you were just talking, reminded me of the time that I was like just getting over Lyme and Babesia and parasites and mold. And I was in my house in Redondo Beach, and I had just gone through a breakup that was really gnarly. And all of these things were happening at once. And I literally could not do any of the things that used to get me through those times. I couldn't exercise. I couldn't eat a box of chocolate. I couldn't go have sex with somebody else. I couldn't, I couldn't do any of these. I couldn't go travel. I couldn't go crash on people's couches. I couldn't get on the move. I just had to sit there and be there. Mm-hmm. And I think on a global level, we're doing that right now with COVID, and it's transforming people's ideas of how they want to live their life. And I think, to answer your question on like how to get through that, and I just think about, how did I get through that moment in time where I couldn't react? And this was a few years ago, before COVID-19. And it was just prayer and trust in a divine, which keeps kind of coming back into play, just sitting back and watching this whole crazy story unwind, watching the dark forces come and struggle and scream and kick and look really ugly, and try to be as much of an observer without being checked out as possible. And I truly believe that it will pass.
Yeah.
Just like the other times did,
You're reminding me, you're actually giving me a really big insight right now, which is like, and not to say, obviously it's always a journey, it never ends, but yeah, like you and I, similarly, like I can speak for myself right now in this moment. Like I feel pretty great physically, right? I'm not afraid of coronavirus. I feel like my immune system is really strong, and I know how to do Ayurvedic cleansing methodologies, and I know protocols, and I know really great herbs and supplements to support me in that. Like I feel, and I, like work out every day, and I feel good, right? And so like on that physical level, like it's just reminding me of, there have been times when that has not true. And now I feel like I'm being invited into deeper levels of that healing where, you know, you have in this chart Tarpana, which is family constellations, and like the way lineage and our experiences of not only our own life but our ancestors' lives move through us and impact us. And I told you before we got on the call, like I really feel like I am interfacing with body memory from lifetimes ago, but also through my female lineages lifetimes ago. And I'm just like nursing and loving on this mother kidney line like I've never done before. And I'm having these wild dreams. But babe, and I'm going to say this on the podcast, I'm also having all of this memory of the abuse and just like holding on and just telling myself, this is an old memory. This is not happening now. This is an old memory. This is not happening now. I think about our Black women and men of color in this country. And I just so get it in the sense of feeling that past abuse in your body and not, like you said, checking out and like interfacing with it. It's so painful, but just as a reminder to all of us, it is the past, and the way out of it is actually say to it, you are the past, and we can create a different future, right? And like that's where I am right now, Kirsten. I feel like I'm being asked by God to like hold faith and hold hope when everything in my body is like, fuck that shit, this feels really bad, and it's a memory and it's emotional, and emotions feel so real, you know. And I just think this hope thing, this faith thing, this love thing, it doesn't get enough airtime right now on Instagram and Facebook and the media. Like no one's like, it's like even an offense to talk about faith and light and love right now, and I cannot stand for it anymore. We need it. It's the only thing that's going to get all of us through everything.
Yeah, the only way to go through it is right direct into it, for sure. And
into
there's
it,
also
outside of it.
And outside of it, exactly. There's also other layers in which to exist, and tying it back in to this multiple layered, multiple-dimensional way of existing that is the truth. If you're into dimensions, you know, you could be 3D and 5D and 12D, or, you know, all of these different things. And
I'm just trying to hang on to 3D.
3D, yeah. And
and pouring in the light, you know, when did love and light become unfashionable? And like, I completely got the message. I've been preaching this message and Kirsten can be witness to this. I've been preaching this message far before it became fashionable to talk about spiritual bypassing, going into the dark night of your soul. I mean, I'm a tantrika, for the love of God. I talk about meditating on corpses, not that I would recommend that. My point though is, if we don't hold love and light while we go into this dark night of the collective soul of humanity, we're screwed. Like, now is when we need light and awareness more than any other time. It's the thing that's going to do the healing on all of the levels.
Exactly. It's the top of the triangle, right? So it's the Ananda, it's the Anandamaya. And by the way, my friend and mentor, Dr. Klinghardt, says, if you encounter somebody who's healing on the Ananda Maya Kosha level, run the other direction.
Wow.
Because nobody is going to heal you from that space. This is your relationship with that divine light, or whatever source you want.
I want to clarify for our listeners. So when we're talking about Ananda Maya Kosha, we're talking about that level of like highest consciousness, awareness, love. So when you say, if someone's working in that realm, run the other way, meaning as a doctor, there's nothing to do here. It's their direct relationship. Dr. Bush, my doctor, says you need to get vertical. It's getting totally vertical. It's saying, I take complete and total ownership for this experience, and I am the one that heals myself.
And that's the top of the triangle. That's the top of the slide where everything, you know, the waterfall, that everything trickles down into these other layers, including that 3D layer, you know?
and that doesn't mean we don't also heal together and through relationship and with a great therapist or a doctor or a friend or a lover, right? Like that's why I love the koshas, is because it's like people get in these arguments like, well, should I heal myself or should I heal through relationship? I'm like, yes.
Yes. Yes. And, we're not living in caves anymore. And we don't have that ability, a lot of us. I think I reached out to you the other day and I was like, what were those like breast massage things that you did before with that one healer lady? And you were like, oh no, you can only do that if you're like living in a cave, which is sort of another story. But a lot of us don't have an actual practice or space to just exist in Anandamaya. A lot of us aren't, 100% of us aren't, whatever you want to call it, enlightened. So to bypass to just the Ananda layer, like, is it possible? Yeah. Can any of us do it? Probably no. Right. And so not forgetting about the body, which is a big lesson. And I will vouch for that with Katie Silcox. That's what she's been talking about since the day I met her. It's not about jumping up towards the heavens. It's about bringing the heavens and letting it trickle down into the earth realm.
Yeah. And into the very, very apparent fact of all of our humanity. And if there's one critique I've had and continue to have of the yoga and spirituality world is that so many of us have been asked to bypass the very difficult work that I think I could put into one word, and that's trauma. Like that's my biggest critique of the yoga world. But if we get caught also in the trauma and identifying with the trauma, that's the exact same trap, only in the other direction. And I really see that in our current world, right? Like the media that this sort of collective delusion around reality, not that pain doesn't exist, death doesn't exist, but that it's the only thing. And that's what trauma does. Like when you're in a trauma state, it's a vortex and it's compelling and it sucks you in. And that is like a definition of the news and social media. And while I think those things are really beneficial and can have, like, obviously almost our whole platform is online at this point, but to just really remember, like, reality is actually happening right now in nature, and she's fine. Like she's totally, like, not only fine, but probably doing a lot better since coronavirus. And to just remember that that's reality. One of the things we're doing over Halloween that we're about to post on is, like, the girls, Marie and Mary, Sarah, had an idea of doing a social media blackout just from Halloween till Election Day. And, to just, traditionally, I didn't know this, but in France, they do that. They have done that so that you can be of clear mind before you go into a really important decision. And I just feel like, I guess I'm rambling, but Kirsten, for people out there, you are an MD, you are a doctor, you have trained in this very scientific way, and yet you also have this added vision somehow, like this huge eagle-eye visionary spirit, which I love so much about you. As a doctor, though, speaking to my community, and again, these are Kirsten's thoughts and opinions. This isn't a statement of reality's truth. It's simply, as we always do, give thoughts and ideas during a moment when no one clearly knows exactly what's going on. In your medical opinion, and when I say medical, I mean all 5 levels of healing, what can people do to best care for themselves at this time of coronavirus?
So, I mean, how to best support yourself during coronavirus. I can tell you what I'm doing and what I'm telling my patients to do.
That's exactly what I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I am keeping all of my systems as clear and as high functioning as possible. And by systems, I mean my detox pathways, right? My liver, my kidneys, and my GI tract. I'm trying to keep that all regular, trying to poop every day, just getting it back to the basics of what we talked about in Ayurveda school. And I am supplementing with a few recommended protocol type things from various trusted mentors of mine, such as
What are
few grams of vitamin C a day. I'm
That's
taking,
a lot.
yeah. It's actually a really great if you have a tendency towards constipation. I like to use that as a nice osmotic way to pull water into the colon and help you have that bowel movement. And so for me, that is absolute medicine. It also, the highest level of vitamin C in the body that exists is in your adrenal glands. And so restoring those adrenals on a daily basis, because we are under a lot of stress, makes a lot of sense to me, just flooding the body with this vitamin C. Some people might not tolerate that on a GI level, might be sensitive. So I always take the buffered vitamin C, is a little bit less like acidic in the actual stomach. So you might want to do that. I also have andrographis right here, is an herbal extract. It's like the mother bitter. They call it the queen of the bitters. That's also, as you know, in Ayurveda, digestion is primary, right? So I'm helping my digestion. I'm helping break down my food so that I can get adequate nutrition out of it. And then there's some evidence from the last SARS outbreak that andrographis was preventative in acquiring that illness. And so I just get this huge mother tincture bottle, and I've been dosing myself on a daily. I honestly, in my personal experience, I feel sick after wearing a mask all day at my office. And so flushing my nostrils and nasopharynx out with some saline and a little bit of xylitol. And I even put a little bit of, and this is just my protocols, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but I even put a little bit of Megaspore probiotic up my nose to help balance the microbiome of my sinuses and nasopharynx, to keep that, because that's really like the first defense, right? The reason you get coronavirus, they're saying it's a very respiratory spread, right? A little respiratory droplet flies off out into the air, or whatever, aerosolized, or in my opinion, you wipe your mask, you put it on the credit card sign pen, and then you leave it for the next person who does that and then touches their mask and breathe it in somehow, right? The virus looks like a little alien ship with little prongs, right? It sucks kind of like tentacles. It puts its tentacles into your nasopharynx. And
I like that you said his, but go ahead.
His? Did I say his?
You're like his. I'm like, coronavirus. Coronavirus is a dude.
It's probably a woman. Who knows?
Who knows?
Viruses are actually just like little DNA segments, so they're not really like actual alive little creatures without a host. So anyways, in order to live, they need a host, which is our cells, and they need to get inside our cells. And their entry port is through the mucosal membranes. And our first line of defense is that mucosa. We have potential to kill on contact those little those little guys, those little whatever pieces of fragments of DNA that plug themselves in to the nasopharynx. We can kill them on contact, and that's our biggest chance, I think, for preventing the illness, is to keep washing. So a little kid in the urgent care sneezes in my face, and this was before coronavirus. I go into the bathroom and I wash that out. Flush, blow my nose.
Yeah, and even I've been doing just so much neti pot, and you can even
exactly.
You can put like a teeny tiny, you could do a small drop of neem, or even Mary Thompson recommends like a small drop of oregano oil, or any of these things that kind of clear out the channels. I think definitely so vitamin C and Anything else? Like,
andrographis, regular nasal flushing at least once a day. And
are you doing the vitamin D?
I'm doing vitamin D 5,000. Yeah, I typically do that. I haven't been doing it a lot during the summer because I've just been trying to get out in my backyard without a shirt on. And in between the hours of 11 and 2, which I have the luxury of doing. Not everybody does. And we don't have the luxury of doing that during, as it's getting colder here. It was like 20 something degrees last night. So yeah, we're going to lose that. So as it gets colder, getting on your vitamin C, if you are feeling a little something coming on, flushing, and getting some high dose vitamin A on board. Talking like 200,000 micrograms, I think is what it is, 200,000 micrograms, which just for like a blast, a little burst for 4 or 5 days to help that immune system knock it down. And then trying to keep it out of the lungs with some N-acetylcysteine. Zinc is also apparently a big part of coronavirus and its mechanism, how it actually affects our respiratory system and our ACE receptors and things like that. So getting your zinc on board too, which is generally good for the for the immune system, and people have used that for a long time for colds and stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about this, because I know you're probably sick and tired of talking about it, but I think people will really benefit from that, of having a little bit of just your thoughts on supplementation. Before we end, anything, we will definitely link to you. I'm sure people are going to want to know more about you. Anything you want our listeners to know? You're one of our favorite teachers in the Shakti school, so obviously they should all sign up to be in level 1 with you. But anything you want to let folks know about going forward that you're up to? I know none of us are up to much at all these days.
Well, for you, my friend, just linking it one more time to what we've been talking about, and the layers of healing and the layers of our existence. And yeah, there's a trauma layer that exists in the Manmaya, or maybe even the higher, or maybe multiple realms, and just remember that when you are suffering on any of these realms, that there's a lot more going right than there is going wrong in the body. And to frame shift, not bypass, acknowledge it, but just know that there's a lot of other channels playing simultaneously and working to help balance what's up for you on the surface right now, including a lot of channels that we don't even know about, that maybe we're not aware of are able to be aware of in our human brains. But there is, we do have the capacity to trust something right now. And I'm just saying, like, that's what I'm lingering on today, because I are holding on to in terms of how I get through the day or whatever. I get to interface with all these layers and all of this, like, I'll just call it magic. And it's happening right here. It's not in the heavens. It's right here in our between the space between my hand and my face. There's a lot going on that we don't see. And there's a lot more good than bad to meditate on.
That's so beautiful. When you're going, and thank you, it is everything. Like, what does that look like for you during your day? Like, how do you, like, for me, like, I will stop and I will have to, like, kind of put my hand on my heart, and I shared something today. Like, I'll say, this is an old memory. This is a body memory. Like, this is not the present moment. Like, coming back to one of the things we do so much in Shakti school is, like, orienting to another channel. So, like, looking out into nature, or rubbing my leg and feeling the tactile sense, or like putting my hand on something cold and feeling the coolness of this moment. Like, but then sometimes it's also like calling in the bigger guns of, like, Jesus or Mary for me. And what does it look like for you in your day? Like, when you deal with the forces of the dark. I mean, we don't even have to say they're bad, right? It's just like the pulling you out of where you want to go.
Yeah, and this is so good. It's just what's going on in people's bodies is a microcosm of the universe right now. And so when I see somebody come in and there's been a lot of darkness that they're swimming in right now, I do encounter it every day in my office. And there's so much more light that they might not be able to tune into or see. And so as an osteopath, which has become like quite a large part of my spirituality in a sense, or my philosophy on life. But what we do is we hold on to that dark and we hold on to that light and we sit back while it does its thing and we get out of the way. And as a third party in the room with this really important process. And so literally that could look like me holding a sprained ankle and holding a diaphragm with my two hands. And that diaphragm is full of vitality, is full of life, is breathing in prana and oxygen. And I'm just waiting for those two things to synchronize between my two hands. And so what that looks like to me is if some of those forces arise in myself, I'm just going to do 2-pointed or multiple points of focus, diffuse awareness. And that's like a trauma technique too. When you're coming out of processing, you might want to reorient, as you say, to the room and the space. There's the light, there's the painting that my friend painted. There's my friend Katie, and, just reorienting to the body by paying attention to a few different things at once will bring you back into that, 0 point or center point. And by the way, that stillness is not static, right? Once you reach that point, you're like off to another realm of full fluid motion and balance. And you can really shift either a state of mind or a sprained ankle. It doesn't matter. You can, by just coming back to balance through holding awareness on a couple of different aspects of yourself or the world that might be opposing and balance each other for you. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And like the image that came to me is like the sprained ankle and the diaphragm and then you getting out of the way is like doctor patient. But then in one's own body, it could be, me as one focal point, the sycamore tree in my backyard.
Yes.
Trying to get out of the way of that. And that really speaks to Ayurveda as well, where these ancient peoples, be they from India or any of the indigenous existing peoples that we're all coming from, our ancestors knew that. Like they knew that they weren't alone. And when one lacked the quality of strength and stability, one could be with the tree that is solid, that is stable, that is so surrendered to reality. They can't move. You know what I mean? Like, and just like a reminder of like that is so powerful. And I'm getting such a teaching right now of so much of our focal point has been self and the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've been bouncing our awareness off the news or Instagram or whatever, right? And what is that second point of focus going to be for you?
Yeah, good question. So humans and living beings tend to match the frequency that they're engaging with. So if you're engaging with forest, you're gonna match the frequency of forest. If you're engaging with internet, you're gonna match the frequency of internet. And Einstein said that the future of medicine is going to be frequency medicine. Yeah. So we want to be careful about what we're really tuning into. And even if you want to just, by the way, like if you're like, I don't even know what these ladies are talking about, these crazy witches, but like I grew up a tomboy, right? And I played softball like a good lesbian. And I was the catcher, right? And so
Wait, you're a lesbian and you've just come out on Shakti School?
I just said, nobody's known it.
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
when you're playing catcher and you're a little tomboy, and not that you need to be a tomboy to do anything, but you can see the person on third base and you can see the person on first base, and you can look at either one of them or you could see both of them at the same time. And if you just literally look at two things but don't look at either of them, you can bring yourself to that new space of observer. And in doing that, you can shift all of that noise of like, that's a cup and that's a railing, and you can just be suspended in the middle. And there's a real magical thing that happens in the middle of that. So what is my focus besides self? If I'm grounding between 2 points, I for sure use nature. I live in the forest. I'm so grateful that I have access to that and feel privileged that I can do that. A lot of the whole Bay Area is coming up here, and I don't blame them at all. But cold water, getting in just submerged in some sort of other frequency that is natural, even if it's your hot shower, just bathing yourself in those ions that were sitting in the copper pipes beneath the ground and collecting ions. And so anything that's has a more natural frequency, because I think we're going to need it going into this next phase.
Well, Kirsten, thank you. This has been amazing. As always, such a pleasure to see you, meet with you, talk to you. I hope to see you in the flesh very soon.
Likewise, hang in there.
Phote phul apon sukhe phote phul